Hello everyone there, and this is Amber O'Connor calling in from Perth in Western Australia. And first of all, thank you very much to Dr. Latika for inviting me and encouraging me to send an audio recording for your conference. I'm absolutely delighted. I love India. My husband and I toured there all through Rajasthan, and it's our favourite holiday destination. Okay, a little bit about me. I'm 68 at present, and my symptoms began at age 52. So I'm 16 years into this journey. They were breathlessness, chest pains, difficulty getting in and out of chairs or climbing stairs or slopes, horrendous muscle pain in the quads muscles, and inability to recover after any usual everyday activity. This was all very sudden, and I was going through a very high stress period. And I just began falling like a tree in the forest, boom, from top down to always landing on my hip. So that's how it began. But nobody did a differential diagnosis. I was put into hospital 3 times in 6 weeks, which said 3 times myocardial infarction. I knew I didn't have heart attacks, but they'd taken my family history with my father being diagnosed with unstable angina at the same age, and I spent 3 weeks there and was on heart meds for a year. So that means I missed out on any medication for having myositis. It wasn't until I really jumped up and down in a hospital clinic and insisted on further tests that I actually got an EMG done and a muscle biopsy in the upper arm. That was by Professor Frank Mastalia, who many of you may know from the Neuromuscular Clinic in Perth, and he's world renowned for his research in IBM. He's more or less retired these days. So the diagnosis came back as PM, and I was quite happy with that once I read ahead and realised I wasn't going to die from it. So living in Perth, I was not aware that there were support groups online. Well, there certainly weren't in the Southern Hemisphere. The only way that I could have found out was if any of my doctors knew and recommended them to me, but there was no networking as such in the medical system or any way of me possibly knowing how to contact other people with this disease. So I was alone with this diagnosis until 2008 when we moved to Queensland. And by that time, I was really visibly walking with a gait and I couldn't lift or carry things, so moving house was a test. I was on prednisone and methotrexate at that time, and my baseline CK levels were 1750 when first diagnosed, and they've never been higher than that. So in 2014, which is 11 years after my first diagnosis, I found a UK group online. So I joined it, and they suggested I start an Australasian support group. I didn't have a clue how to do anything like that, but I figured it out because of the desperate need. And within 3 weeks, I had Myositis Support Australasia up and running, hoping to capture the Pacific Island people and those in Africa, so all of the Southern Hemisphere, because nobody was dealing with it. And I carefully placed my team of admins from all major time zones around the world so we could offer 24/7 support. And 6 weeks later, I produced a really great quality website as well. So at the end of 2014, my husband and I visited London to meet all the UK admins and the members. And they had a reasonably new group as well. We then drove all around Europe for 5 weeks, and sadly, 5 weeks after returning, my husband, who was then 72, died 5 weeks after returning. We were both at that time carers for my mother for the past 8 years, who was aged 93 and had Alzheimer's. So it was actually a relief for her to go, and she, as I said, she passed away 5 weeks after him. Finding myself all alone after 6 months of doing paperwork and estate management, I took myself on a solo trip across the US. I needed to know what my capabilities were. I was using a walking stick outside, walking around the house inside, but I needed a scooter for longer distances. And I went there to meet the US members of my group and their admins. I also gave a name change to the group. I realised that Australasia was keeping us from growing in numbers, so I changed it to Myositis Global Network, and that's how it remains today. So the numbers grew really rapidly with that change of title, and branding is so, so important. Still, we don't have any members from the Pacific Islands, but we do have members from Africa now and Europe, and we've also got a dozen or more from India and Southeast Asia. And as I said at the beginning, we love India because our trip to Rajasthan was so amazing. Support. If not for all the members in my Myositis Global Network and the UK support group, if not for the members posting to me throughout the day and night and replying to all the photos I sent, and I made it very much myositis based, photographing toilets and handrails and accessible rooms and all of that. It really became a blog, and them checking on me every day allowed me to, it motivated me to get through the whole thing. I honestly did not think I would come back alive from a trip like that, and I didn't really want to, because I didn't want to have to face what I had to face alone. I'm a mad photographer, a very keen photographer, so I set up a blog to encourage people with mobility issues to find ways to continue travelling, and I posted hundreds of photos of all my challenges because photography is my passion. And you'll notice that I've said I needed to find out what my capabilities were. I didn't call it my limitations because I didn't see that I had any limitations, and I didn't see that I had a disability. I thought I was a person with mobility problems, and I've refused to call them limitations. They're just challenges, and I know what I'm capable of doing. So these support groups, and particularly the one that I belong to, are what got me through some really, really challenging times. Vision. My vision when starting this support group in 2014 was always to join up as many patients with myositis as possible from around the world. My focus has always been holistic, and to create a huge extended family who, with just one or two clicks of the mouse, had instant support from anywhere in the world from the only people who really know what this disease feels like in its many varieties. The sharing of our individual experiences quickly led to a sense of self-empowerment, and patients were better able to ask better questions of their specialists. So confidence improved immensely. Formerly, before I had to retire medically at 52, I was a university lecturer and a psychotherapist. So in my group, we deal with issues of grief, coping skills, loss of identity, a sense of belonging, and feeling helpless as a patient when you no longer have a job or you can't do things that you used to. We help people find their sense of purpose now that their work life has been curtailed. I deal with PTSD and relationship breakdowns and basically a lot of fear. So we try to get life in proportion. A little bit about me before I had myositis. We were living on a 4-acre rural property in the southwest of WA. It was formerly a 140-acre apple orchard. There were chemical residues in the soil, on the fence posts, and we had chooks and chickens, therefore eggs, goats and sheep, which we ate, cows, the same, vegetables, an orchard. All of that was done in contaminated soil, unbeknown to us. And our neighbour had a tomato farm, so all the drifting chemical sprays would come into our place, and we thought nothing of it. And the Shire sprayed the road verges with chemicals, and we thought nothing of it until I started to break down. Just a word about mould. We were renovating our 100-year-old homestead, and this was during the 1980s. So we pulled down all the lath and plaster ceilings. Goodness knows what was in that mix. No one wore face masks in those days. And our bathroom was black with mould because it actually didn't have a window in it. So I was then tested by an environmental scientist and an immunologist, and cigarette smoke was one of my biggest contaminants. I was teaching where there was a staff room of 20 staff members and 12 of them smoked heavily in a closed staff room with the windows all closed because it was a very cold place. So those were the triggers to breaking down my immune system, the chemicals and the high stress. The biggest stress was that I accidentally became pregnant in 1985. My kids were 12 and 10 and I didn't know at the time. I became like a lifeless rag doll within a few weeks, and doctors had advised the pregnancy be terminated. They had no idea what was wrong with me other than it was really serious, and I couldn't shower, I couldn't get out of bed, I couldn't dress myself, I couldn't even hold a knife and fork. So once the pregnancy was terminated, much to my sadness, I immediately recovered. And none of us expected that result, but that's what happened. And I kept that piece of information, never knowing what it was going to mean. But in my support groups, and I've adminned probably 3 or 4 different support groups around the world, there are so many, in fact, way too many young mums that are joining, and they have developed PM or DM during or after their pregnancy. And you have to be silly not to see there's a pattern going on here. The other main cohort of female members of our groups are women diagnosed during or after menopause. And they are the main 2 cohorts for women joining. Well, I was 52 at that time, so bingo, I fell right into the menopause category. So we then moved to the city after that, and I still continued on working till age 52 when I had to stop. My vision for the group and for all the support groups for myositis was to have a network around the world with a positive focus on how, keyword how, to live with a neuromuscular disease or a chronic disease, and how to be in capitals, the person that you always were and not be your disease. So don't wear it as a label, and to help people remain independent as long as possible. My scooter ride across America to the US was to know about what I was capable of, not to wonder what my limitations were and focus on that. And I went there without any drugs and without a carer. And only then did I realise that I was in this on my own and that I could keep myself alive. So I have admins still all around the world. They share similar visions, are very positive and focused on other people. And we help patients help themselves and help them be better prepared for their own specialist consultations. My wish out of all of this networking of support groups is that with a cohort of over 4,000 patients with myositis around the world, that there would be some researcher, someone out there doing a PhD who would want to study us. We in Myositis Global Network have a huge database, very, very detailed. It's rich source material there for someone to do a study on. So that's it briefly from me, and I cannot say the importance of how the support group gets me through each day, each week and each year, and how I've survived 5 years without a carer, without my husband, and without seemingly having any purpose in life. So thank you, Dr. Latika. I hope that wasn't too long for you, and this is pre-recorded, so I'm looking forward to seeing what's happening at the conference. Bye, everyone.